Today I gave a $10 tip to a pizza delivery man. He broke down in tears and gave me a hug while thanking me for being the first person in a very long time to be nice to him. What have you involuntarily done to make someone cry of joy? One day I was in line at the generic Chinese cafeteria near my office building. It was almost the end of the day, and I was enjoying my half hour off in between my 2 full-time jobs. An older woman stepped into line behind me. We were about to the ordering spot, and I saw her glance into her wallet, look around, sigh, and turn to leave. I gently touched her arm and asked if she would like me to buy her dinner. She got very teary-eyed and tried to decline, but I insisted. She insisted after we ordered that I sit down with her in the little cafeteria area and have dinner, so I accepted. She said it had been a very hard day for her, and that having a random stranger offer to buy her food was the nicest thing anyone had done for her in a while. I was getting off work late at night, and there was a lady with her daughter at the front of the store, with a cart full of groceries, apparently waiting for a taxi that's an hour late. She asked me if I could take her and her pregnant daughter home, which ended up being down the street from my house. So I took them home, and she explained to me she has a fear of leaving the house. And it was her first time leaving in 5 months. She offered me X dollars, but instead, I helped them take their groceries out and put the money back in her pocket. I gave her a hug, and she broke down in tears saying how karma will repay me for my good deed. TLDR, took home a lady afraid of leaving house, and her pregnant daughter home. Denied gas money, and helped them take groceries out. Bursted in tears and told me karma will repay me. My father is now 83 years old. I recently learned about his random act of kindness that happened more than 60 years ago. I wept as my mother told me the story. She began, "You know your father will never tell you this, but I want you to know when you and your sister were very little, your father worked in the coal mine near Alpha. It was dangerous and dirty work. One day while your dad was working his shift, a guy on the crew broke his ankle, and your father watched as others carried the fellow out of the mine. Your dad thought about that fellow with a broken ankle all during the rest of his shift. He kept thinking, how will this man feed his family this week and the next? That day, at the end of my dad's shift, he went to his boss and asked if he could work double shifts for a month or 2, so the fellow with the broken ankle and his family would continue to have a weekly paycheck until he could return to work. Dad's boss said yes. Dad worked his shift, and the extra shift for a crew member he did not know much about, except that he had a wife and children. Dad worked double shifts for 2 months. I had an opportunity to ask my dad about his random act of kindness. I told him he was truly a hero. Dad simply said, it was the right thing to do. I worked at Subway at the time. It was 6:30 PM on Thanksgiving, and we were closing early, at 7, for the holiday. A middle-aged woman came in and told me she wanted a turkey sub. I start making her sandwich and was making casual small talk. She started crying as she was telling me what she wanted. I asked what was wrong, and she told me she had no one to spend Thanksgiving with and this was her turkey dinner. I felt so bad for her. She was openly sobbing in the middle of the store. I took off my gloves, walked around the counter and gave her a hug. She collapsed on my shoulder and just wept for about 5 minutes, while I told her it was okay, and to cry all she needed to. Eventually, I finished making her sandwich. We get to where she's about to pay, and I tell her not to worry about it and ring it up as my employee meal. She started crying happy tears this time and thanked me a lot. She sat down and ate her food. As she's about to leave, I rush up to her and give her another hug. She thanks me again and leaves the store. I saw her again a few months later, and she looked much happier. I still regret not inviting her to eat Thanksgiving dinner with me though. One of my classes my senior year of high school was taught by a very young, fresh out of college teacher. At the beginning of the year she was very happy and excited about teaching, but very quickly the students all began taking advantage of her friendliness. Knowing she was new, it was easy for them to manipulate her / the class without her being aware of what they were doing until it was too late. By the end of the year she was frustrated and sad, and I overheard her telling another teacher she wasn't sure if she had chosen the right career. On the last day of school I brought her a tray of cookies. I worked in a bakery at the time, and a note thanking her for being my teacher, and telling her that I appreciated her taking the time to help me learn. She cried and told me she had been planning to quit, but that I had just changed her mind. It surprises me how it's never the big things that can move someone so much, but the small things that almost seem inconsequential. My class at university did something similar for our lecturer. He's had a shitty time, as our university has cut a lot of staff, so he's single-handedly doing the work of nearly 4 people on reduced pay, as he isn't churning out the required number of research articles per year, instead focusing on his classes and students. He always tries to be as cheerful as he can, but we could tell it was getting him down, so during the semester, we all put a little money toward a gift for him, and gave it to him at one of our final lectures. It was an engraved trophy with 2 names, for being the best lecturer of 2012, with thanks from class, as well as a gift card to a game store. He likes his video games. He cried and told us that this was the first time any class had ever done something like this for him. A few years ago, Fable 3 came out on the Xbox. I know it was October, because my brother's birthday is then. Anyway, he comes home from school, bursts into my room and asks me if he can watch me play. He would always do that when I got a game. Sit down, watch, and once I was done playing, would ask if he could play. I'd imagine people with little brothers can relate. Anyway, he's standing in my doorway, asking if he can watch. I said, "No, dude. Go away. I just want to play in peace." He kind of hung his head and was about to walk away defeated. Then I said, "Here, take this extra copy I got for you. Happy birthday," and threw it at him. He started bawling, crying. It was pretty awesome. He's a good kid, and that's one of his favorite series. TLDR, got my brother a game as a surprise. Made a huge 15-year-old cry. I work in a pizza shop, and this family came in to celebrate this kid's 10th birthday. They asked if I could do something for the kid, and I said no problem. I noticed that the kid had a Pokemon shirt, and I asked the parents if he liked Pokemon. That kid started rattling off all sorts of Pokemon names and such, and I knew what to do. The parents ordered what they wanted and I told them that the kid would get a pizza made by me, and it would be on the house. I talked to my manager about my plan and he was all cool with it. I made that kid a Pokeball pizza. Half marinara, half ranch, with black olives that traced the lines of the Pokeball. His face lit up like a Christmas tree. The father and mother were so appreciated, and the mother cried. No one was ever that nice for their son. He was so happy. It really made me feel good to know that I impacted someone's life, let alone their birthday, positively. That kid will have a good story to tell about how some nerd made him a Pokeball pizza on his 10th birthday. Last week I was having breakfast at Chick-fil-A, and as I was sitting in my truck eating, I noticed a homeless guy sitting on the curb behind the building with his dog. He was holding a sign asking for money or food donations to help feed him and his dog. Did not look like a druggie or alkie, just an older man down on his luck. I observed him the entire time I ate my breakfast. He mostly just sat there scratching his mutt and holding the sign while people drove past ignoring them. When I finished my breakfast I decided to make another run through the drive-thru and ordered a large chicken biscuit combo. As I was leaving, I pulled up alongside him and handed him the bag of breakfast and a small bag of dog food I had in my truck for when I bring my dog to work. The bag of Chick-fil-A put a huge smile on his face, but when I handed him the bag of dog food the guy literally lost it and started bawling right there on the side of my truck. After regaining his composure he exclaimed that it had been so long since somebody had treated him like a human being and considered him and his dog that he was just overwhelmed by emotion. I asked him if he would be willing to work hard for a decent day's pay, and he immediately straightened up and exclaimed that he could be the hardest worker I had ever seen. I gave him my business card and a $5 and told him to meet me at that spot the next morning, and I would put him to work. The next day I stopped in, and sure enough he was waiting there for me. I loaded him and his dog into my truck and took them to the job site. He wasn't kidding about being a hard worker. This guy carried wood around and fetched tools out of my truck for me all day without complaining once. His dog just shadowed him the entire time. During the day I learned about how he had lost his wife in a car accident, had his home that he had lived in for 35 years repossessed by the bank, had no children or family, was staying at a KOA campground, and had a bunch of his life possessions stolen, had been spit on by strangers while begging for money, and had all but given up on the human race as a whole. At the end of the day I took him to my bank and withdrew his day's pay, which amounted to $80. The look on his face was well worth it. My random act of kindness seemed to put a spark back in his eye, and I continued to pick him up the rest of the week in the same spot and paying him at the end of each day. Yesterday when I dropped him off, he asked me to take him to a different spot, near the KOA. He explained with the money I paid him he was going to be able to afford camping provisions for the next couple of months, and told me how much it meant to him and his dog to not have to sleep outside on the cold ground. Another thing I might mention is that he became friends with the guys on my crew, and they brought in some used camping supplies for him, so he was all set. When I left him last night he looked like a different person than the man I saw hanging his head in shame behind Chick-fil-A. He promised me he would be there for me next week if I needed him, and although my job site is going to be on the other side of town next week, I have already decided to continue going out of my way to pick him up and put him to work. Feels good, man. Edit. Sorry for never updating this. I will update here since it seems people are still actually reading this, and some have asked if I still employ Charlie. Charlie worked with me for about 3 weeks total. During the time he didn't once complain, and every morning he was at our agreed upon meeting spot bright-eyed and sober. After the 3rd week he shook my hand and told me how grateful he was to me for giving him a chance to get out of the rut he was in. He informed me that he was traveling south to Florida, and would be leaving on the weekend with a group of people he had met at the KOA. He never mentioned what it was he was going to Florida for, and I never asked him. I only hope that whatever it was he was looking for was waiting for him there, and I hope he is still doing better than the first day I met him.